Now, listen to Pierre Poilievre here. I think this is one of his best news conferences in a long time because he focuses on Carney's hypocrisy.
Just like Justin, and he's more of the same. We have the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal advisors, the same Liberal promises, who will produce the same Liberal results. Doubling housing costs, doubling the debt, doubling lineups at food banks, enriching the global elites at the expense of the working class, and making our economy more helpless and reliant on the Americans than ever before. Now, Mark Carney is trying to hide from his record over the last 5 years of advising Trudeau in favor of raising carbon taxes, money printing inflation, and blocking resource projects, all while he moved his company headquarters and jobs to the United States. You know, it's ironic. Mr. Carney is trying to distract from his many scandals and conflicts of interest, as well as his disastrous record as Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, by talking about Trump. He's the guy that sold out to Trump. 6 days after Donald Trump threatened Canada with tariffs to steal our jobs, Mark Carney announced to Brookfield shareholders that he would move his headquarters from Canada to New York. And when you asked him about it, he lied to your face. We got it in writing, and we proved it. He sold out Canada. He put his profit ahead of our people, and he did exactly what Donald Trump wanted. Never before have we had a Prime Minister so conflicted and compromised, and yet so little scrutinized. Just like when he supported carbon taxes in Canada while investing in American coal. He opposed Canadian pipelines while his company bought Middle East pipelines. He has millions of dollars of financial interests that run against Canada's national interests. He gets rich making Canadians poor. You can be sure about one thing. Donald Trump's going to have a briefing on his desk of all of Mark Carney's American investments. We need to break our dependence on the Americans by building east-west pipelines. We need more interprovincial trade. We need to unleash our free enterprise system to reverse the helplessness that the Liberals have caused over the last 10 years of tax and keep it in the ground extremism. More than anything, we need to bring back the Canadian promise. In a country where we trade with each other, we produce our own resources, we build homes for our people, we protect our weak and vulnerable while standing up to the Americans abroad. The Canadian promise is that anyone from anywhere can achieve anything. That hard work gets you a great life.
What instructions have you given your caucus members and your candidates about wearing MAGA merchandise or using MAGA slogans?
This is a very nervy question. So you can't wear MAGA merchandise or MAGA clothing. Now, Poilievre's answer is so-so, but it's better than it could have been.
Well, my instruction is that we should put Canada first. We want to put our country first, stand up for our country against both American aggression, but also against the destructive Liberal policies that have made us helpless and reliant on the U.S. I have also made it clear to my members of Parliament that we should favor bringing jobs back to Canada, not move them to the United States of America as Mark Carney did when he had the chance.
Do you still think we're going to have a carbon tax election, considering Mark Carney says he's going to scrap the consumer one?
We are going to have a carbon tax election because Mark Carney has proposed to add another industrial carbon tax on top of the existing one. In days, Donald Trump could impose tariffs on Canadian steel. At the same time as Mark Carney says that he wants a new carbon tax on Canadian steel. By the way, it's not me that says his tax would apply to steel. It's him. In an interview he gave to CTV in Atlantic Canada a month ago, he claimed that taxing steel was a great idea because people, he says, don't use steel anymore.
Now, you think he's kidding? We've got the clip. Now, I've shown this to you before. but I'm glad Poilievre picked up on this.
Large polluters pay. And so what happens...
But does that not ultimately trickle down?
No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element of that, but by and large, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd? I mean, not as much we used to. So anyway,
So, no, we're not using any steel. And why it took so long for anybody to notice that, yeah, we use steel. Just have a look in your kitchen. Do you have a refrigerator? Do you have a stove? Do you have a dishwasher? Do you have a car? Do you take a bus? Have you ridden in a train or an airplane lately? Do you work in a skyscraper? This is all steel. Let's get back to Poilievre because he really digs in here.
This building would come crashing down without steel. Automobiles would be impossible to make without steel. Our civilization is, the bones of our civilization is steel. And Mark Carney wants to bring in a big industrial carbon tax on our steel workers at exactly the same time as Trump plans to tariff our steel. The combination of Trump's tariffs and carbon tax, Carney's tax, would destroy our steel sector and threaten our national security.
Okay, well, there's a second part to this. I want to get to this because it's beautiful how he's turned this against Carney. Carney is supposed to be an expert, right? He was a banker. He was a central banker. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of England, failed in both respects, especially at the Bank of England. And yet he talks about the economy like an eighth grader. I'm kidding you not. We don't use steel anymore. When's the last time you used steel? Well, sorry, Mark. Either you're living in a bubble, a vacuum, or liberal land where steel isn't relevant anymore. A little more of this Poilievre interview because I think he's really back in his stride where he needs to be because an election is imminent, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Pattern for Mr. Carney. He claimed that he helped Paul Martin balance the budget in 1998. Well, Mark Carney wasn't even in the country or working for the government at that time. He didn't join the government as a bureaucrat until 2004. So this is a consistent pattern of Mark Carney lying to the Canadian people. You know what I find interesting about Mark Carney? He doesn't want to take responsibility for the things he actually did, like advising Trudeau for the last 5 years, but he wants to take credit for things he did not do.
You've heard of these people who pad their resume. Well, Mark Carney is that kind of person. As Pierre Poilievre just pointed out, now he's taking credit for Paul Martin balancing the budget. Stephen Harper has said, hey, this guy is misrepresenting himself in his role as governor of the Bank of England while I was prime minister. But Mark Carney, of course, takes credit for everything. But one thing that Poilievre missed in that otherwise very good news conference, the carbon tariff that Mark Carney is so enthused about. And let's listen to this again.
Third thing we're going to do is to ensure that there's fair competition for our companies and that we penalize high polluting foreign imports. So we're going to develop a carbon border adjustment mechanism. What that does is promote jobs here at home. It prevents carbon leakage abroad. And it aligns Canada with our allies who are still engaged in the fight against climate change.
Put that up there again because you're going to be hearing about this carbon border adjustment mechanism. And most people are going to say, what the hell is that? Well, it's a carbon tariff is what it is. And Mark Carney will be putting that in place in addition to his corporate carbon tax, which the corporations, of course, will offset on you. Of course they will. That's how taxes go. I get taxed as a corporation. Well, I have to charge more. Or we'll find another way to get the tax back out of the consumer. So Carney is pretending he's wiping out the carbon tax as of next week, apparently. And we'll get to that in a minute. But don't be fooled by thinking the carbon tax will disappear if he just offloads it on corporations and has a second carbon tax that's a tariff. Now, this is how this gets really scary because these corporations that he's going to be taxing to that are going to be passing it on to you or leaving the country. There's going to be an exodus of business from this country as soon as Mark Carney starts implementing his toxic economic program. This is a man whose life has been nothing but toxic.